Welcome to RPG Reanimators, a podcast for GMs where we dissect horror scenarios and offer our experiences and advice to reanimate it at your table. I'm Lex.
I'm Alex.
I'm Nathan.
So let's see what's on the slab. Today, we have 3 choice cuts: Oath of Blood, Poison Soup, and 10. We'll be dissecting and reanimating each of these in order, and we'll provide timestamps in the notes for this episode. And so, as with any dissection, we'll also be discussing all of the gross innards for each scenario. And from this point on, there will be spoilers. So if you're interested in playing any or all of these scenarios, please stop here and share this episode with your GM so they can listen and consider running these for your group. We'll also include links for where you can purchase or find copies of these scenarios yourself in the show notes for this episode. And now with that out of the way, let's begin our dissection.
So our first dissection is Oath of Blood, which is a scenario written by Sam Shirley for Call of Cthulhu 6th edition. In this scenario, mobsters are sent to investigate the mysterious deaths of 2 high-ranking enforcers.
So, Alex, how did you come across this scenario?
So as I was perusing Chaosium's Blood Brothers, I found Oath of Blood, which was right after Uncle Timothy's will. I read through it, saw what an amazing concept this was, and I had to run it. I had to run it for Into the Darkness.
So it just kind of hit your camp vibes, because that's kind of the theme of the book, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Before we get into the whole beating heart part, what was it that really caught your eye about it?
Vampires versus mobsters. That's it. What more can you say?
No, that's fair. I don't know anything about this one, so.
So basically, the synopsis is there's just fucking vampires out here in New York City, and the player characters are all working for this big mob boss guy named Dutch Schultz. He's called the Dutchman, and 2 of his best enforcers, Joe and Frank Booker, they were found in an alleyway just mangled up and drained of blood. So he assembles the team of player characters to investigate and find out what's going on and to put a stop to it. So
hopefully successfully.
Yeah, this scenario is pretty short. It's only got 6 pages of content and really 3 locations. That being the morgue, where the bodies are, and the restaurant where the bodies are found. The book tells you that to place clues in order to lead to the final location, which is the Empire Hotel, where the vampire Count Ronilov Tepes commands his living and undead mob, because he also has a mob. So just the way the scenario structure goes, right? It kind of expects the player characters to visit the restaurant, and they will talk to a waitress who identifies, what happened and who has been following the Booker brothers when they last appeared. And as for the hospital scene, the main clue there is that, yeah, these bodies, they're drained of blood. However, with the right light, or with a successful spot hidden roll, the investigators are going to see that, hey, the eyes of the dead Booker brothers, they're following the players around, so they're not quite dead. That comes back later in the scenario where the Booker brothers become potential enemies because they become vampire thralls themselves and sicked on the gang members.
Yeah, I remember, because I got to play in this, the eyes following you in the morgue was really cool because the bodies were so clearly dead, and then the way you described them, they were just shredded, basically. And to walk past this table and just see these wet eyes looking at you, that was great.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the charm of this scenario. You get these awesome moments. There's no specific written down action sequences. It's really up to the GM, and I made quite a few significant changes to this scenario when I ran it for Into the Darkness for a Halloween one-shot.
Can you talk about what those are?
Yeah, of course. After I talk about the beating heart of the scenario. No, I'm kidding. I would say just focusing on the themes of the scenario, uh, like vampires versus mobsters, pulp action, and these big action scenes. That's what I decided to focus on. And I'd like to segue a bit and say that I think it's really important to identify the tone of the game and how the mechanics can really support it. Because originally this was written for Call of Cthulhu 6th edition, which is Call of Cthulhu, almost like classic Call of Cthulhu 7e, where people don't have a lot of health, guns will just rip you apart. And reading through this, I'm like, okay, well, there's like 8 vampires and then like 20 mobsters that this vampire count has under his control, and they're just gonna destroy the player characters. So how do we get the mechanics to support the narrative? Well, let's turn it to pulp Call of Cthulhu 7e. That's what I ended up doing. I went ahead and converted the player characters, and then I also added a backup PC just in case something really went wrong. And these mechanics supported what the scenario was trying to tell. And honestly, I think that was just a great improvement. So that's one major change I made. I also cut some content to fit it into the 4-hour window. There was an attorney that worked for this Ronalov Tepes. I didn't really decide to follow that avenue because I knew that would take up some more time, and I really wanted to focus on the action. I added some shootout scenes. I actually added, there's in the text, the Dutchman, Dutch Schultz, he orders the player characters to check in with them like every morning in like a barber shop. And I'm like, okay, well, let's move that forward a little bit. So let's press on the gas a little more. So I instead turned it to be at nighttime, right? Because at nighttime the vampires can come out and attack. Right. And now we have this awesome scene where they're in this Italian restaurant in the back room, and then they just hear Tommy gun fire open up from the front, and they're screaming in chaos, and then something happens, and now the restaurant's on fire.
So I gotta ask though, with all of that,
yeah,
did they get to use the garlic in the restaurant in their favor at all?
Yeah, so they used a bunch of garlic towards the end of the scenario, but this was the turning point where they realized that they were vampires.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the scenario, the mob boss, if he sees like there's like actual vampires with his own eyes, he's gonna give the players all the support that they need. But I was like, okay, I was reading through it, and I'm like, okay, but when is this actually going to happen if he's just only meeting them during the day?
Right.
And only getting word of mouth. So why not just have the mob boss see it when the restaurant gets attacked by vampires?
It's a good time too, because you really, with how lethal the vampires can be, that's a good spot to have a bunch of backup mobster characters.
Oh yeah,
because there's a decent chance we had somebody go down in that fight. You could easily lose a few people.
Oh sure. And yeah, you just need to identify these almost choke points for your scenarios and deal with them. And that is exactly what I did. I also added a drive-by scene when the player characters were moving to and from locations, because just to add a little excitement, like someone almost got their head blown off by a car that pulled up and a double barrel just stuck out the window.
Well, that was a good way to get an informant on the inside, too. I don't know how you would have gotten that. Does the scenario cover that of actually getting a hold of someone, or is that what the lawyer is supposed to be?
No, it does not. So everything you've seen so far, Nathan, in your playthrough has pretty much been manufactured. The only concrete parts of this scenario are the bodies in the morgue, the restaurant, and like what they saw, which is not that much, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then the final bastion for these vampires, which is the Empire Hotel. I also added a secondary location because I wasn't sure how much time we had, and it was like a funeral home, because I thought it'd be very entertaining to have a vampire like safe house as a funeral home. That was very fun.
So going through all these changes, I think I can see a pattern in this. But just to say, what was really the beating, or maybe in your case, the still heart of this scenario?
Yeah, so I would say the still heart of this scenario is vampires versus mobsters, focusing on pulp action and creating these great larger than life set pieces, like just in the streets of New York having a gunfight between cars, or having an Italian restaurant filled with people just getting absolutely riddled with 45 ACP Tommy gun just bullets, and then
Yeah.
like a huge showdown at the top of the penthouse of a hotel.
Yeah, all of these have sounded really cinematic. I can already just see it playing in my head. I really like that. I'm still imagining if the mob boss may have tried to, if they needed a weapons drop, then they would have to go to this funeral home, not knowing that in the casket they're expecting to find a bunch of guns, more vampires pop out.
Oh yeah, that would be an awesome scene. Like now that you've heard the basic idea, Lex and Nathan, like how would you put your own spin on this? What ideas would you have? Would you talk to me about that?
I think if I were going to run this, I think if I was going to stick it with pulp, I'd probably maybe cut the end morgue piece or have it entirely take place in a funeral home, because I really liked that idea of them having that like creepy cold basement with the caskets and the things that they're turning vampires, and you can re-meet the brothers there. I think that's a fun way to go. Another fun thing you could have is the brothers that got turned come back and actually help turn the player mobsters. So you might have this fun vampire v vampire final battle, but that's completely pulp at that point. You're throwing horror out the window, as the only thing that can fight a big vampire is a bunch of badly accented New York mobsters, shooting Tommy guns and then flying around as bats.
I think with me, I'm seeing a lot of levels that you can have some intrigue and maybe some complications for players. So I would make the first mobster very strict Roman Catholic. And whenever they are confronted with this incontrovertible proof of vampires and all these things that attacking this big explosive showdown at the restaurant, he's going to go off the deep end and just say like, this is pure evil. You exterminate this. And he's going to start like being off kilter for the rest of the PCs, that they're going to be like, okay, if you're going to keep buying into it, if you're picking up what he's selling, there's no problem. But if you're showing any resistance, he's going to get real fiery. And then as they keep going and they see their boss become more and more unhinged, then maybe there's a second in command that'll just be like, hey, this guy, maybe it's time for him to retire. You know what I mean? And he's a vampire. And so then they can choose to get in with the vampires and then change sides and then try to take over the human mob. Then maybe there's the Italian vampires that happen to show up and they just fall out of frying pan into another fire.
That just reminded me, there was a character that had an uncle that was a priest, and we got a really fun like info drop right after that restaurant scene where it's like, oh, my uncle's a priest, and we go and talk to the priest. He's like, yeah, I know about vampires, they're all over the place. Let's
You ever
bless your
read Bram
weapons.
Stoker?
But I mean, it was great. The priest just out of the blue. It was like a movie when you run into that guy and he's like, oh, you're looking for vampires? We all know about vampires. Here's a bajillion things. You get your dump. Now go shoot them.
It's weird you don't know about them, quite frankly.
Come over to the church. Bring your bullets. And then you see him just like dip them all in holy water.
Yeah, it's like any of those Conjuring movies where they're like, oh, yeah, the Annabelle thing. I can tell you all about Freddy. And you're sitting there like, how would this random person know anything about Freddy? But they do.
Listen, the priest's brother, he was killed by a vampire. What a coincidence.
Ain't that just the way?
Yeah. So we have some great ideas going.
No, I could definitely see a way that you could try expanding this out into its own turning into either the vampire mob or vampire hunt, like former mobsters turned vampire hunters trying to go in for all of these things. Like, really, if you want, you can keep setting those pieces up further down the line. I just think it's a question of like, when would you be satisfied? Just, are you good with the ending for this as a one shot, or is there enough intrigue that players would have fun having Pult Cthulhu vampire hunting? Because that sounds kind of badass to me.
Yeah, I mean, like, if we're talking about expanding scenario, originally it's just this 4-hour one shot. But I can see mobsters versus XYZ, where XYZ are just like other supernatural horrors, like, oh, mobsters versus werewolves, mobsters versus aliens.
Right.
You can just go on and on.
The first thing that my brain goes to with all this is if you wanted to have a sort of a mobster mini campaign for Call of Cthulhu, and if you wanted to pulp up misdoes. That's a super fun mobster-based scenario that you can just have as a little further on down the line, this happens. And so then they can just keep encountering all the weird shit going on around Arkham.
It's a really great way to have a different kind of investigator group, because you have people drawn in with all kinds of skills that have different motivations depending on who's in charge, what kind of things they need to do. You've got protection rackets, extortion rackets, and you get to have more of a reason that your players could be arsonists because they're already criminals.
Oh, they're already tabletop RPG players.
We're
they're
legitimate
arsonists.
businessmen.
Yes. Also, you can do a little bit of Prohibition era whiskey runs and things. That could be a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm trying to think of a way that you can have the PCs get suckered into what they think is a Prohibition whiskey run, but they're smuggling blood for the vampires. As they have it, they're smuggling all the whiskey in these caskets or something. I don't know. Can't.
Oh,
think
that's
that
incredible.
quickly.
That would be an amazing follow-up or a clue.
Yeah, then like they drop one and then it starts spilling, and then they find that that's not whiskey that's pouring out of there. It's too thick. And it's all blood.
It tastes funny.
This whiskey tastes like, oh God.
Ragu!
And so once player characters get the head mobster's approval after he sees these vampires, right? Then they're going to have everything in their disposal. They're able to get dynamite. They're able to get like sniper rifles, Tommy guns, shotguns, cars, whatever, even the assistance of other mobsters in this mob, so they could just storm the tower where this vampire lord is, and that just leads to some great action scenes.
Yeah, I remember that vampire throwing people out windows left and right. That was great.
Oh, he tried. And then we had people hanging on to the ledge, and then someone else went out the window and is grabbing onto the person hanging onto the ledge, and it's just pulpy, and it's...
So where was the vampire's base? Was it, I'm imagining, either like a business skyscraper or
he's in the
cathedral?
He was in the penthouse of the Empire Hotel, and he had all the windows like covered.
And I thought, Alex, I wanted to do a kudos because we had a player that had gone down to a single hit point, spent all their luck to survive, and they had taken a sniping position on another roof so that they can still offer support, but they're a little bit out of harm's way. And I thought it was really smart how you brought in a vampire that attacked them but didn't do straight hit point damage. It would drain their strength as they were going, so they still had this really cool fight that wouldn't immediately kill them if it sneezed at them.
Of course, they had the strength drain, and that's actually written into the Call of Cthulhu 7e vampire stats, not the Call of Cthulhu 6e vampire stats which were included in the scenario. So that's actually another update I did. I took the vampire stats from the 7e.
I know I've been watching too much What We Do in the Shadows, because immediately all I'm thinking of is Colin, and that you could have an energy vampire come up behind him so he's helpless with one hit point. Sometimes whenever people go to clean their rifles, they use linseed oil. You really shouldn't. You could try an olive oil, but that tends to scorch with too high of a heat, and just draining their sanity the longer they have to listen to it.
Just fucking jump. But yeah, that was great. I always love having people in multiple scenes, but
Mhm.
also being able to affect each other. Like that sniper who was taking Overwatch on an adjacent on a building across from the Empire Hotel. They were able to snipe the people on the ground floor, and then when they moved to the penthouse level, they could just raise the rifle and aim there and help out with the fight. So always find ways to include your player characters. I didn't make it too easy for them too, because they had two like vampire bats fly down on them. They shot one with a holy water infused 30-06 bullet, and then it turned into a guy midair, and he went splat after they got shot. And then the other one obviously had this tussle, this blood draining tussle on the rooftop.
My brain is completely going what we do in the shadows now. If there was a witch's hat that you could find in the vampire's penthouse, turn into a bat, they fall down, bust the table.
There was nothing funny about that vampire, I'll tell you right now. He one hit almost killed me, just Superman punching me into an elevator.
Yes.
Horrible stuff.
Yeah. Like, have an idea of what this monster can do and then just make it a reality. Because, like, you know, what does a D3 plus 2d6 damage bonus even do? Like, what does that even look like? Well,
it sounds like getting hit by a fucking truck, man.
Exactly.
Jeez.
So that's why I had the vampire count just do like almost fly through the air Superman punch, double fist right into the mobster. Because that just makes sense. That frightening speed.
I just want to note too, as that player, I not only got shot in the head, I got punched by a thing, and I'm not the combat guy. I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Both times.
Pre-gens were so
and
good.
Everybody else is like, "We're not getting hurt at all," and I'm bleeding on crutches through there, like, "I'm gonna make it, yeah."
I feel fine.
I particularly like two of the pre-gens that were on offer, and one is Vito Caprizi, and the other one's Vinny Caprizi. One's obviously real small, and the other one's like, you know, big tough guy. And you could have your players really just play into those tropes.
I'm glad you brought that up. What were the other pre-gens that you worked through, or do you have any recommendations if you were to workshop these again? I know I tried to make several for Miss Dews, expanding on the ones in that scenario. But yeah, any recommendations? What makes a good mobster, especially a mobster vampire hunter?
Sure. So there was actually a 6 pre-gens available, but I actually cut one of them as an option entirely because I work best with 5 pre-gens. I made the backup pre-gen of the Corrupt Cop just in case we needed an extra backup character, and the one. So let's go through them. There's Brian O'Reilly. He's just a mobster, a made man, and what actually happened? What he has a story connection. He's actually the nephew of the priest, so he can get called up as an option. And then there is the mob lawyer, who is basically the smooth talker of the group. And obviously, as part of converting this all to Call of Cthulhu 7th edition pulp, I gave them all different archetypes as well.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see if I can make them available. Other than that, there was Harold Cupperton, the mob enforcer, who's the mob hitman, great with weapons. And then there's Vito and Vinny, the small and large mob thugs.
That was really fun to play.
I definitely would like to see more rules on using, let's say, the garlic or rosary beads or holy water, because that would definitely help out.
We were talking about how we probably ate like garlic meatloaf that day, and we should be immune, really.
Yeah. And maybe do some damage to them as they try to take a little sippy sip. I don't know, Nathan, you just put in Vinny Helsing in chat, so now I'm thinking all the names for the pre-gens would be Johnny Hawka, Lucy Weston, Minnie Hawka. I don't know. And just try and keep that pun lightly hidden. So like, it's fucking, God damn it.
The scenario is just so simple.
Yeah.
Like, it's just vampires versus mobsters.
I think you hit right, though, is pulp. We've talked about before. It's action scenes tied together. And you did a good job of having it be, there was some investigation to kind of get the scene set, and then it was action set piece, action set piece, action set piece, and then you're done. And it kept it moving really well.
Right.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I know you said that this was for 6th edition, and I think whenever we had Holly on for Uncle Timothy's Will, she said that this was written in the 70s or something. So
yeah, I believe for 6th edition as well.
yeah, it's definitely a case that I think if this Blood Brothers anthology collection, whatever, were to be remastered, like pulp would be a great fit for it. It just hadn't really been invented yet.
Oh yeah.
Because that's something that I have heard as a common critique for a lot of older Call of Cthulhu scenarios, that they tend to be way too combat heavy given how frail the investigators are. So there may be a lot of opportunity to remaster the older scenarios into pulp for something like that.
Yeah, these all kind of the Blood Brothers, it's all camp type stuff.
Yeah, kind of schlocky.
Yeah, works great for pulp. And we were still in danger, it felt like. There was, even though you can spend luck to not die and to reduce sanity loss, by the end, I don't think we were sitting on a lot of luck. So if you were to run this in a campaign or whatever, it would be pretty hefty.
Honestly, as a GM, though, if you spent all of your luck to not die, you're going to be a vampire. That's your way of not dying. I would bend the
that'd be
rules
fun.
just for this as a one shot that, like, yeah, someone comes up and bleeds into your mouth.
Ooh, that's incredible. Yeah, I like that.
Our second scenario up for dissection is Poison Soup, which is a scenario written by Mud Gentleman for Call of Cthulhu and available for free from Mythos Japan. In this scenario, a group of investigators wake up in a concrete room with 4 doors, a table, and a bowl of warm red soup. I originally came across this scenario. It was posted on Reddit from a Mythos Japan account. Someone had done the fine graces of translating the scenario for free and also releasing it for free. You can go and download it now. We're going to put the links in the show notes for this here. This was originally written as an introductory scenario for Call of Cthulhu in Japan. And I find that it had a really neat flavor that was kind of different from the typical investigative format. As I mentioned earlier, the investigators wake up in this strange concrete room. They're wearing these blank, kind of cult-like shifts with 4 different doors around them and a bowl of red soup along with a note. Behind each of these very different doors are 4 very different rooms that contain such things like a library, a kitchen with a big pot stuffed with chopped up human meat, a prison-like bedroom that holds a silent albino girl holding a pistol with a decapitated body that she does not recognize. And in the final door is a church that has this strange looming large statue in the background. And if they go inside, they're going to meet its very hungry guardian. Each of these rooms has another slip of paper with a little clue or something to help further this riddle along so that PCs can either try and figure it out or come up with a solution themselves in order to add this secret missing ingredient to the bowl of soup and then drink it before it gets cold, or else they will be collected. All of this is orchestrated by the Chogner Fawn, which is the elephant dude that's on the front of the Call of Cthulhu Investigators Handbook. In my opinion, he does this all for his own entertainment. So as the GM, it's pretty easy to lean into that aspect for it.
Wonderful pronunciation. I've never seen that actually
I
said
just
out
went
loud.
for it. I just saw all of these consonants and things. I'm like, yeah, that's good enough.
What's the beating heart of this scenario, Lex?
It's an escape room where you cannot take reality for granted. Everyone tries to approach this in the same systematic fashion, and then something defies the laws of physics, and then they start realizing they can't trust anything. And if they start thinking that this is a dream, and they try to wake up by killing themselves, they feel pain and they stay dead until the end of the scenario. One of my absolute favorite aspects, that it causes the player to start second guessing, did I just fuck up? And so I find that great.
What do you do if they decide to off themselves early? Do you have backup characters that they can play temporarily just to
No,
stay
I
in it?
don't, honestly, because this scenario is pretty short and self-contained on its own. I could give them the girl NPC, but In this case, I wouldn't. The scenario can be run anywhere between like 1 to 2 hours to 4, depending on how much the different players RP. And this would be one of the few cases where I would say I would let them stay dead. They want to try to be smarter and short circuit this scenario. That player is going to get to live with those decisions because that's going to make everyone else very paranoid about what just happened. And in my opinion, still be entertaining if they're sitting there at the table.
So what brought you to this scenario? What really caught your eye?
To me, it was very short and self-contained and had a very different vibe than from a lot of the things that I've seen for, to my experience, regular Call of Cthulhu. I haven't seen a lot of escape room scenarios, and I haven't seen a lot of scenarios that make use of riddles. Even in the case of this one, like the riddle isn't hard, but it's just each of the clues are so vague that it's able to sort of build on it for that there. It also, there's one point that someone has to get sacrificed to the hunting horror that is the guardian for this statue in the church room to the south. And players have to decide, is someone going to try running through and grab something that may be in there, try not to get eaten themselves? Or are they going to shove this mute girl into the room and the only sound they hear her make are her screams from behind this door, which causes an earth-shattering amount of sand loss? And so that can cause just enough of a conflict that I think that this is a great scenario. If you don't know what to run for a one-shot, do this. It's so simple and easy. Really enjoy it.
I actually got to play in this one when you ran it for Into the Darkness, and I really enjoyed the puzzle aspects that were in it. There are a lot of notes that you talked about before, and they are well written that they give enough of a clue to try to do something, but you really got to kind of think cleverly about them to unlock various elements in the rooms. In particular, I remember the library. There was a book I think we needed to get out of there, but we had to be very careful about how we did it because it was kind of trapped with the door there.
Yeah, if you take any books out of the library, the door starts slamming and comes to life as a black goo and starts attacking anyone to try and bring the books back in. That's Tom almost died from that thing in a single hit. So yeah, that was the big moment whenever, oh, this is not just a concrete room. There's something else going on here.
Is there any opportunity or chance where you can just soft lock yourself out of the puzzle, like if you can't answer the riddle? Or are there fail-safes for that?
I mean, the fail-safe is you're going to die. Because this is so short, and in a way, it's kind of inconsequential. If they don't add the secret ingredient, which is poison from the Black Lotus, either from this book that they can find in the library, or there is a vial that is in the dirty light bulb that's hanging in the room that they first woke up in. They have to add this poison to the soup. Hey, doesn't that sound like the name? And then drink it before it becomes cold. If they don't, then the Chogner Fawn will awaken and come and claim them and consume them to me. So this is, whenever I run it, I very much imagine this is like TV for old Fawn. And so he's just watching all of this kind of chaos and giggling to himself. And then whenever the time is up, he'll just reach down and you'll see his hands go through the doorway. And then like he's ripping a curtain off of something, just rips the entire reality of the room up. And you just see void in front. And he'll just lean down and pick up each of the investigators in turn and drain them with this weird elephant snake tooth nose thing. So yeah, I mean, it's if they don't figure it out, if they soft lock it, if they dump out all the soup, there's a little bit left that maybe 1 or 2 people can drink it. But even if you fail, it's still entertaining. I don't think that there is a boring way out of this.
Oh, nice. And the players are hinted to drink the soup from the riddles?
Yes. So I can read through these first ones. So whenever they first wake up, it's a blank concrete room with a table, this bowl of soup in a thick stone bowl, a dirty light bulb, and a sheet of paper that says, if you want to leave, you have 1 hour to drink the poisoned soup. Until you do, you're not getting out of here. If you don't drink it in an hour, you will be collected. And that's all that they have to go on. So each of these other notes can give, so in the one where you open
That's
up
great.
these, yeah, if you open up the
Mhm.
prison room on the decapitated body, there's another note. This is your nameless servant. She obeys absolutely everything she's told to do, even if she doesn't like it. She's a quiet but friendly, good girl, so please treat her well. This mute figure, it describes her as being just super pale, white, like albino-ish, whatever. But yeah, she doesn't ever say anything. The first time that I ran this, I had her kind of zombified, basically, and players couldn't really tell, like, if she was all there. They were super suspicious because she's walking out holding a gun and doesn't know that she has blood on her clothes. In the time that I ran it for Nathan for Into the Darkness, I gave her more personality, but I view this as sort of either someone who was collected or just a construct that Chognarfon makes to have a little butler going around inside there. But she will do what the people say, but if she doesn't like it, like whenever, I'm trying to remember, someone told her to go into the room with the haunting horror to get eaten, and she was shaking her head no and protesting,
Yeah.
but her feet were like unwillingly carrying her closer. So it made everybody feel really bad, which for me as a GM was super fun.
Yeah, this when we ran it, it had that great part of the escape room where there was just a lot of things going on, and you had to work out what way to combine them to make what you wanted to happen, which is kind of the key to a lot of these. Is you end up with a lot of tools, but no guidance on how to actually use them.
And I'm so glad to hear you say that, because it's, to me, in running it, this is a super simple scenario. I mean, there's a grand total of 5 rooms, only a couple of key things to note in each room, but like for the player's side, they're really trying to work with all this. So it feels like you have a lot of options, and it's just kind of, GMs don't need to worry about overextending themselves. Like, you can stay there and give details. As long as you hit these couple of bullet points, then your job is done.
It's a good way to practice the yes and sort of improv as
Mhm.
well, where they'll come up with a solution, and as a GM at the moment you get to decide, like, well, is that close enough? Does it work? And you can say yes, or you can say that's actually better than what's in the book. Yeah, absolutely, sure,
Right.
yes.
I kind of ran into some issues with this. I remember in the beginning of that, in that game, Matt Sanderson was scouring the first room for something. I remember that everyone else was fanning out, and he spent a lot of time trying to like search the table if there was anything else under the note. And I'm trying to remember what I did. That was just one case that like I couldn't yes and in that, because I just had to say like there's truly nothing here, and it's so damn weird that there is nothing else here. That like I don't remember what I said, but like the bowl or something, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel normal in some way. And so then people flocked to the kitchen to try and find the ingredients. There's a note in there that says the important seasoning is currently out of stock. So someone had the idea to look at all of the ingredient labels and to see if like there was one of the canisters of seasonings that was empty, so they could figure out what that ingredient was. And I'm like, that's great, but like I think that this is just tricksy enough that kind of lends into the escape room aspect, that like that may be the first impulse and that's good, but that's not the right tree. So trying to give other hints and things that might guide them in other directions.
I like the use of Chogner Fawn as a sort of TV watcher, old one. Like, he's really just interested in the entertainment value here. So I love that bit of the time limit is your show's canceled because he's bored.
Basically, I mean, because it's, even whenever I read through the like the Call of Cthulhu entries for it, it seemed pretty self-sustaining and self-sufficient. Like that's Jongrafon wasn't necessarily malicious. He's not like Dagon trying to do stuff. He just kind of hangs out until people disturb him. So yeah, I like the idea that he's just seeing all these people dream and scooping up a handful, throwing them in his little hamster cage, because what else are you going to do for millennia?
So what would you like to see improved in this scenario?
Overall, that's kind of a hard question, because I think that it's one of its strengths is that it's super simple. The main things that I have added to it whenever I ran it was just more evocative descriptions for the statue in the prayer room, so they can tell this looks like some sort of a holy room, but because of the dim light, they can't tell what this deity is. Maybe it's Ganesha. They can't quite tell. The big thing that I would kind of liked was more detail in the library. And every time that I have run this, people have jumped on it and have tried super hard to try and find something else, something extra in there that can give them more information. And so at one point I had, all of the books were blank, or it was all the gibberish. I didn't like that, so I just threw that part out. Another one is I had books that were in different languages, so I gave them a lore dump, sort of on Chogner Fawn and different mythos entities. One time I had them stumble across this really interesting book that caught their eye that had the title Leroy and Jean, and that they started reading it and they felt like it had all the answers there for them. And then whenever they woke up at the end of the scenario, it was on their bedside table, just as a little treat to take with them.
So do you see that as something that could lead to actual like campaign repercussions, or do you want to keep this as kind of a self-contained side story?
You can really do either with this one. The first time I ran this, it was smack in the middle of a campaign. It was a group running through Music from a Darkened Room, and they had
Delta Green.
Yes, it is. And they had done 3 consecutive sessions of research at the library. And I was tired of just doing research. So when they went to sleep, we did this for a little diversion just to have something new come up. And also, I had one of the players that interacted with Chogner Fawn and did the thing. They woke up with more memories than they had. They didn't know what these were or necessarily how to access them, but functionally I gave them some Cthulhu mythos, or unnatural because it was Delta Green, but I gave them some points in that they could then use. So they remembered how to make an elder sign from memories that were forcibly implanted in their minds because they were stuck and I needed them to just finish the scenario.
That's fun.
Or in the ITD run, it was purely a one-shot. And in my opinion, this can really excel with it because I made a bunch of wild pre-gens. Because to me, the PCs can be similar. They can be mundane, like every other investigation, that it's an accountant, it's a police officer, it's an archaeologist. But I had one be a movie star named Mick Rage, who is non-copyright violating. And then I had another that, Nathan, you played this bored, lonely housewife that was a Kohl's manager in Iowa or something. I had a nature photographer. Someone was a bank robber. And so just all of these random people getting put in, and like, you could lie about who you are because you wake up not in your clothes and with these total strangers. I found that seeded a lot more RP and was just a hoot to play through versus all of these PCs who already knew each other. We're like, what's this? What did you do?
So Alex, based on kind of what we've talked about here, how would you do this at your table? How would you reanimate it?
How would you pulp it up?
How would I pulp it up?
It's pulped soup.
Nathan's gonna Nathan's gonna hate it. Add zombies.
There you go.
Actually, I don't think I would pulp it up. I would lean in towards this escape room, this surrealist vibe, almost uncanny. Take aspects from David Lynch's works.
I took a lot of inspiration from PT, the Silent Hill demo.
Oh yeah, that's a great demo. Shame about the
I have an old PlayStation that still has it. I'm never getting rid of it.
But if I wanted to increase the PvP, I would lower the amount of soup available escape. Likewise, if I wanted to just eliminate PvP, or not really eliminate, but like just have soup be refilling or have it be abundant, I would add a consequence of failure, right? Like the players, they might think their player character died if they just somehow die. But maybe when they wake up, right, they have this lasting punishment. Maybe their POW goes down, or they're branded, or maybe they're even given something that they need to resolve, which will lead to another scenario. Like, that's a great way to interconnect things. And speaking of consequence of failures, let's talk about the other thing, like rewards. I saw that by playing through this scenario, Poison Soup, and as you put it into your Delta Green game, like they were rewarded with knowledge of how to do an elder sign. Like, that's great. Maybe this is something they could try and come back to and over and over again, and there'll be different riddles, and in case they want to find more knowledge. And last but not least, just to make it a little more interactive and not so player focused, I might add some NPCs that may or may not be helpful at all, but it's at least another voice that they can talk to in case they get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
But what about you, Nathan?
I think I'm definitely interested where you're talking about the consequences of failure. I like using Chogner as kind of a, like, somebody that's bored and wants to be entertained. So if they go to sleep again, like, did he eat their dream form? Are they basically dreaming that they're just in a vast wasteland with no way out? Or does he come back and give them more opportunities to attempt to succeed at different riddles and puzzles just to entertain him?
Right.
But of
Season
course,
2
as
of the
it
game
goes,
show.
right, but it gets more and more sanity draining as you go, and maybe even have some moments where you tell players, like, oh, you wake up, you're going about this investigation, and they start to realize, no, we didn't wake up, we're still asleep. So you kind of have this mix of dream and reality that he's sort of punishing the players for not playing along by not letting them discern what's real and what's not as much.
Yeah, that's definitely reminds me of Inception. That idea.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that y'all would change with the general vibe of the scenario? I know that I've had, like I mentioned, some issues where players are really searching for things that aren't there. So I know, like, Nathan, you're the king of yes and things, but is there anything that you would do to try and facilitate more of it? Or are you okay with saying, no, this is the room, these are the tools?
No, I think that's exactly what you need to do. Is sometimes when players say, is there anything weird about the table it's on? The answer is no, there's not.
Or what table?
Yeah.
Oh, and Alex, to your thing, that was one of my favorite details, is once they are certain that the soup is blood, the scenario even says, like, they can cut themselves and bleed into the bowl to refill it if they need. I really like
smart.
Yeah, I like all of y'all's conversations on the consequences. That's something I haven't really tapped into with this. I think, if they kill themselves or they get injured in this and don't drink the soup, they may wake up with psychosomatic, like, numbness, or like have some sort of a lasting implication that they always feel that injury with them, so they can't forget this. Whenever they drink the soup and poison them, that was what I tried to lean into with Into the Darkness, that, like, I graphically described, like, they start frothing at the mouth and convulsing on the floor, and I stay really quiet for a bit to let players think, like, is that it? Did I just kill myself? And then they wake up again. But yeah, like, maybe Chogner gives them a little bit of Cthulhu mythos and they have some additional memories. If he claims them, honestly, I would just say, like, they can wake up, they will never dream again.
Yeah.
And, like, just completely consumes that part of their subconscious whenever they were claimed in some way. I haven't really given a lot of thought to it, but I really like y'all's stuff.
Nice.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
You're smelling what I'm stepping in. What?
I think for me, one of the things that I would be a little cautious with is that haunting horror. I remember you'd mentioned that it can one-shot people, and with how it's hiding in this statue room, there's a decent chance somebody's going to walk in and not see it and be attacked.
Oh, 100%.
So if they do it too early, that could be someone sitting around for a couple hours.
Well, this was something I didn't even talk about, which is also something I think is fun. The haunting horror, as written, that it just needs to kill someone, and as soon as it kills one person, it leaves. and departs from the room. So like the way it describes it, like, you know, it just kind of fucks off to somewhere. But I have it where the horror will attack the person. The first time I ran it, the player kept trying to fight it with the gun. And it's really sad because the gun barely gets past its armor rating. And so he was picked up and trying to shoot the gun with it.
Minimum 1 damage.
Right. And he so the thing ended up, I think I had it rip into his chest and eat its heart. And then everyone else saw this horrible, impossible sight where this giant beast starts funneling into this hole in the PC's chest. And like as it rips out, as it's eat its heart, it just like sucks straight into it. And so it disappears down this cavernous hole in that other PC's body. So like they are extremely fucked up. And
that's an awesome scene.
Yeah, give everyone else some big sand hit, and then they really don't trust. Like the first time I ran it, they're like, "Is he going to come back? Like, what are we going to do? Can we burn him?" And so, like, they never know when the threat's gone because sometimes these threats will just show up and gank them. And again, because it's a short scenario, I don't mind doing that when it happens.
I'll always burn the bodies.
See, I would be tempted, in order to keep the player going, just to finish up this. Have them have the open chest and still be alive in Poison Soup Land. And they don't know what's going to happen, right? You have this terrible feeling of like, do I eat the soup? Do I get claimed? What do I do? And then you could play around with this idea of if they get out, the haunting horror's coming with them in some fashion.
Oh, I like
that. So what does that look like? Right. Like
they hear this voice muttering in their head now.
Right.
Just waiting to hatch.
Which could be a really fun thing.
I have heartburn ever since I woke up from this.
Oh,
right.
Geez.
And then you're going like, I think I have a horrible dream monster in me. How do I solve this? And that's a fun motivation for players.
Mm-hmm.
Our third scenario is 10, which is a scenario written by Choya for Call of Cthulhu. In this scenario, a pair of investigators wake up in a locked room with a vending machine containing the key. But to get out, they're going to need to sacrifice body parts to the vending machine. So I ran into this scenario when Nell, our friend, just offered to run it for Alex and I. It's published as a pay what you want on drivethrurpg through the Chaosium Miskatonic repository program, and it comes with some pretty hefty content warnings. The easiest way for me to describe it is it's the Saw movies. This is very much a mutilation-heavy, very character-driven sort of scenario where horrible things are going to happen to people, specifically around fingers, in case the name 10 didn't clue you in enough.
Oh, not toes?
Surprisingly,
no, that's
not
11.
Toes. I can count to 20. So in this, it's dead simple. It's even simpler than Poison Soup, which I think it shares a lot of similarities to as written. It is specifically written for 2 investigators, and they wake up in a single room with a vending machine in one of those gumball machines, but it's opaque. The only light is out of the vending machine, and there is one door that has a note on it that says the vending machine has the key. Get the key, get out, basically. The problem is the vending machine is set up with holes in it that are about finger-sized. And there's basically little guillotines inside that you pay for things by inserting fingers and having them cut off. So you immediately have 2 characters that have to figure out, how do we interact with this machine in a way that, you know, we get out of here.
Yeah, they've got a limited budget. So what are some of the things that you could buy with those fingers?
Well, you could buy food, which does nothing for anybody, but I guess you could do it if you wanted to. You could buy a first aid kit. You could buy pain pills. There's a couple of weapons in there. I believe a gun and a knife. And lastly, there is the key, which is going to take 10 digits. And boy, oh boy, those are hard fought. Because so Alex and I played this. The main vending machine, it really was a case of how do we do this fairly and a minimum of pain for us, right? Like, do we buy the pain pills and then have our fingers cut off? And just like Poison Soup, there was a lot of discussion about how we wanted to do it, investigation of the room. Like, you'll try and open the door and it starts to leak this black liquid out of it that burns when you touch it. The mirror ceiling has something above it that's like whispering about how it's afraid of the dark. There's just a lot of really cool things to search and find in this.
Yeah, so what kind of themes did you identify? What's the beating heart of this scenario?
The beating heart is really about person and another person. Like, we played I just played who did I play? How am I not remembering this? I remember your character. You were a cool politician guy.
Damn straight.
And I was just a reality TV star. So you kind of come in with these characters and you have one-on-one interactions between them. And I could see this whole session, which is set to specifically play in an hour. It could go a million different ways on what two people you put in the room. Some people are
you could
gonna
immediately just start murdering the other person.
Exactly, right?
But that'd make for a less fun game, in my opinion.
This one's really about the role play. If you just did it purely without caring about the characters, you just say, okay, cool. I put in a hand, I put in the other hand, we get the key and we leave. That would be the end of it. There's really nothing stopping you from doing that. You have to play the characters for this and have them do that research, try and figure out why, like, are we really stuck here? Is this our only option? What's in the bubblegum machine? The bubblegum machine does have fingers, but it takes teeth and fingernails. So the ratio is not great either.
The exchange rate's horrible.
How does that work exactly?
You put teeth and fingernails in, and it pops out a finger.
So you have to rip off your own fingernails and teeth?
No,
do they correct. Pliers?
No, don't be ridiculous. Yeah, we punched each other in the mouths a couple times to get some teeth out. And we kind of realized mechanically through the game, because we literally did, I punched Alex's character once, and then he like prize fighter knocked out, I want to say 12 of my teeth over the course of 2 punches.
Oh yeah, my politician, he was once a boxer.
And you rolled ridiculously well for that to just completely decimate me. And we figured out mechanically through hit points and stuff, teeth to finger ratio was not very good. We would die from just small hits basically before we were able to escape. So we could
end up with CET, man.
But it was a lot of fun just having these interactions. And then there's the obvious Saw kind of body horror of you're cutting off a finger. As written, they kind of play it as, oh, you know, you cut off the finger and there's a void behind it, and it's not, it kind of lowers the tension of it. But the way Nell ran it was a lot more visceral and reality based, where it's like, no, you cut off a finger, like there's blood spurting, you kind of need that first aid kit.
Yeah, give me the blood.
Yeah, well, it really made it have more impact, I think. And actually, once you get to the end and you exit, as written, it does the same sort of thing that Poison Soup does, where it's like, oh, you wake up and whoever had the key is fine. And everybody else, if they lost limbs, lost fingers, those just don't have any feeling to them anymore. But as she ran it, and this is what I liked more, is we woke up in an alley, and I think I was even missing an extra foot because I didn't have the key. Alex's character actually took me out and saved me. But at the end of it, we were missing a good number of fingers, teeth. Like, there would be lasting consequences for the characters. And I really thought that was cool.
I'll admit I like the grittier reality based version of it. I think like a Void, it's kind of, oh, this doesn't feel as real. But I'm just imagining if finding a way to use sound effects, if you can have this
Oh
mechanical
God. Oh, I
and
hate
like
that.
you can hear this pincher just go, and like there's a little bit of meat left out, and you just hear the same mechanical whirring and
Ooh, yeah.
snipping each time. I really think that that could be great.
And that's, I think, what makes these sort of escape games so much fun is
Mhm.
you have to think kind of cleverly as you go and filter it through your character at the same time, where your character might go, well, this would be the smart way to do it, but he's not that smart, right? Like
Right.
maybe he's a self-sacrificing person and he's just going to stick his hand in without thinking of the consequences. Or would he take the pain pills, or would he say, no, it only costs, I think, a finger for a pain pill. So do you just cut off the finger to numb the pain, or do you tough it out through all of it? There were some really interesting choices, I think, and a lot of it relied on it being just two people.
Hmm.
You really can't do this with a lot of players because that dilutes a lot of, I mean, you just start splitting up fingers among people, and you get to the point of, if, two fingers per person, you lose a couple pinkies. It
Right.
doesn't
You
have
would
that same impact.
Yeah, you would need to really escalate things that maybe the cost is higher or there's another step to go through and things like that.
Yeah. And they do have a time limit. The vending machine has an hour countdown or a 2 hour one for online. And like there's something above the mirrors that is escalating as you go, like some voices, bloody fingerprints, dripping. I think we talked about like staining blood of some kind. So there was a little bit of a need to get out of there beyond just, well, why don't we sit and wait for an hour to see what happens?
Yeah. So you've talked about the scenario a bit, but could you talk to me about what you liked about the scenario and what improvements that you could see?
Yeah, I liked that it was so simple. I think Nell ran it in an hour and a half, and it says in person it should take about an hour. I 100% agree because there's no gristle on it, right? It's purely you could walk up to the machine, get the key, and leave. The time limit is built in. It's great. It does then rely entirely on that player interaction. Like I had a ton of fun playing with Alex because we had a lot of cool character interaction back and forth. If you didn't have that kind of fun relationship with the other player and GM, I don't think this would be as much fun. I really liked that it had lasting consequences, like I said, of missing a foot, missing fingers, something to kind of think about that would affect your investigator. We were talking about this after. This could actually be a really fun start to a longer scenario where you kind of have these saw-like death traps that people keep running through. You could even have like a GM put each person or a pair of people through these and then have all of them meet back up for the full campaign. So you'd have all these people that have been through an extremely traumatic event meeting up to maybe hunt down the killer or the mythos entity that was causing this whole thing.
Yeah, that's great. I like that.
And I wanted to point out as well, you talked about sounds. One of the things that was really neat is that the author put in a bunch of background music and labeled it with the type of scenes that they'd run in. So, like, just normal background music. But if a fight broke out, they had a music to put on there. If they failed to escape, there was something there. And that's a really nice attention to detail for people that like music.
Hmm.
So I've talked enough. How would you two reanimate this scenario if you were to run it?
I would definitely see that, like on my read through of this, sanity loss was a bit high. So either I'd change that or like trim down the sanity loss, or just change to another system completely. So as for like the sanity system in Call of Cthulhu, right? If you lose 5 or more sanity in one hit, or if you lose more than, I believe, a fifth of your starting sanity, you just go indefinitely insane after you lose sanity. If you lose a single point of sanity, and I feel like that takes away agency. And like, let's say you are unlucky enough to roll faint, then the game's already over.
Mhm.
Assuming the other player takes advantage of that. So that's why I would change it to cult. Same thing with the HP, right? If they're gonna tax you, you know, a D4 HP every time you take a finger off, well, normal players, the average health of a person, of a player character in Call of Cthulhu is like 11 to 12 health. So you can see how there's like a fallacy there. So I would change it to cult because they have a more abstract health and sanity system. It focuses away from like the strict, like, this is how much health you have, and that would allow the player characters to really just talk more and focus less on the numbers meta wise, and also like the grittiness and like the unpleasantness of this scenario really fits cult.
Yeah.
And you could maybe even spin it so that it's like it's a Nephirite or some other entity that is causing all this pain, and because cult's got a great like lore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. I definitely agree too. Like, as Nathan was describing all this, like, yeah, this felt very culty in terms of the grittiness and body horror and sacrifice that's involved with it. I'd be really curious to see if you do run it in cult, Alex. I'd love to see a recording of it.
I actually might. And another change I would make is to definitely signpost threat more, because we had the blood and the fingerprints, but like maybe halfway through the time's up, maybe even have some entity try and like take us or hurt us, and then disappear. So then the players are like, okay, we actually need to get out of here. Because if you're just sitting and you're seeing like bloody handprints or whatever, you could really just wait out the clock, and that'd be a shame. Because you don't know that there's something that is definitely going to kill you.
Right.
The last thing you want is just people to sit around and go, well, it's better to do nothing. They need a motivation.
Right.
Oh yeah, and there's definitely players out there like that, and that's perfectly fine. I'm all about giving them more options, so I suppose I would change the price of some of these items.
Sure.
I know there's a sleeping pill item, and that costed 2, and the numbing pill costed 1. I would actually make the numbing pill and the sleeping pill the same price. That way, if someone really wanted to screw over the other person, they could sacrifice their own like finger and be like, oh, you know, here's the numbing pill. Just take that, and then it's over.
Oh, that's smart.
It's actually the sleeping pill. But yeah, there's a lot of options. Throughout the Nell's run of the game, I've really thought about braining Nathan, or just like using the electrical cord to strangle him, or stabbing him with broken glass. But
I bet your character thought about that too, right?
Oh no, my character was like, my character. I wanted to make it more dramatic, so I definitely brought up like, oh, like, who are you, kid? Like, what do you have to lose? And that made it a lot more complex, where I think this scenario shines. It's with this interplay between just the player characters.
Well, the nice thing is, if you had done that, it's an hour game. Like, if you killed me 20 minutes in and that was the end of it, great. That's still a fun story that we went through. I'm not worried about 30 more sessions where I don't have this character. It's perfectly fine.
Right.
How about you, Lex? What if you were to run this?
If I were to run it, I would swap out those pain pills for 1 stick of morphine.
Okay, yeah.
And I would also add in a pair of pliers. Just like maybe if they search around on the machine in the back, like there's a bolt that they were tightening and there's a single pair of rusty pliers that are back there.
Would you have that item available, or available for
I would have
to buy via fingers?
No, I think that if they wanted to search around the room and be desperate, then they could find it. Because, like, that's my thought is I love the fingernails and teeth because, I mean, if you wanted to be economical about it, rip off that fingernail, then stick the finger in the hole. Like, otherwise, you're wasting some opportunity
Oh,
there.
we didn't even discuss that.
I think how I'm imagining this vending machine, just, hearing secondhand from you two, is each item is one use only. And whenever you push the button for it, that's whenever it clamps shut, and you can see which one of those clamped. And so then there would only be, kind of like Alex, you mentioned in Poison Soup, like not have enough for everybody. So there's only one thing of morphine. There's only one dose of first aid kit. And all of this stuff to get people a little hungrier, or if they wanted to use the gumball machine, maybe not have all of them be fingers. Maybe there's another thing of morphine that's in the gumball machine because they don't know what's in there. And add some more uncertainty and scarcity to heighten the tensions a little bit more. I think similar to Alex, I would want to signpost a threat of just waiting for too long. I love this gritty realism and Saw aspect to it. So I think what I would do, I love the only source of light being from this vending machine. Maybe on the wall, they see 616 is spray painted on there. And then they see the clock on the vending machine is ticking a little closer. Maybe it starts at like 4:20 blaze at PM.
Come on.
They have, and like as it's going, they can see this happening, and then they might notice that it's getting kind of warm in here, isn't it? And then like maybe there's this dull vibration that keeps building the closer it gets, and it gets really hot, and they're worried about baking alive in this room. And like the floor starts shaking and everything with this building vibration. There's like that should be enough to help spur anyone that like, well, I'd rather lose my fingers than burn to death. So let's just do that then and hurry it up. And then I think just running over other details, I love the cult aspect. I need to finish reading through the core book so I can play or run it because I really love the vibe of that system. I would not make this mythos based by any means. Like the whole dream thing, like that's neat. I think it works better for Poison Soup than this. Because something I feel is missing in a lot of Call of Cthulhu and Delta Green stuff is the boundless pit of human cruelty. And everything ends up being, oh, it was the monsters. It was the old ones because of their ways we don't understand. No, it's just people being fucked up. And I think that and the pointlessness and senselessness of it is arguably more terrifying than some other grand cosmic machination. The last thing that I'm really stuck on is what pre-gens I would make for each pairing of running this. Because like Alex, you mentioned this with your politician and just saying it's like, so, what do you got to live for, kid? Like have someone that would be a CEO and some street junkie kid who is, kicked out of his house and been on the streets. He's 19 years old. So like someone who's going to be scrappy versus real privileged and will be happy to kill someone to try and get their way. So really try and feed that in there. Or just having very mundane, innocent people being forced into this situation. Like that's just boundless entertainment.
Well, that was the neat thing is Dell didn't give us any pretense, and it was entirely a make someone that fits into this setting. So it could have been
anybody. The setting?
You just said modern
the current year. Yeah, that's it.
Oh,
it could
okay.
be literally anyone. And I completely agree with you, Lex. One of the favorite things that I had with this is there is no explanation. Why is this happening? Why these two people? You could have good people, you could have bad people. It all comes out in the role play, which is really fun, right? Is between the two of us, we could kind of come up with some reasons why maybe someone put us in here. Why would somebody do this? Like we're kind of both famous, but you never get an answer, which is horrifying in its own way.
And usually cool Nathan and I usually kill each other when we're in the same scenarios. But this is the one where we decided to work together, and our player characters got real close and became like almost blood brothers.
Yeah. I felt so bad when you went unconscious. I'm like, well, I'm doing the math on my fingers and hit points. I'm just gonna stick his hand in the machine a few times, and he won't feel it. He's unconscious. It's fine.
That was the other thing. Alex, you mentioned that the sand loss in this is kind of tough as written. Of course, I haven't read this. I haven't heard of it.
We've got a lot of D6 losses,
Really?
D3 losses on successes. So
no,
really
I wouldn't.
rough.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I think I would do either a. I'm trying to think how I might run this. My gut instinct is to do a 0 and a D4 for sand loss for doing this, but on repeat attempts, maybe pad that a bit. So maybe it's 0 and D2, then 1 and a D3, 1 and a D4, because like you're getting into this shock and this repeated trauma. And I would just do like 1 HP damage for each finger. I wouldn't take any HP for the nail, just because like that's enough to like, you're gonna RP that pain perfectly fine. And then maybe after they have lost, just keep a little track in one of the tables, like if they've lost 3 fingers and it's been a while, deduct another HP of damage if they're bleeding out, to give them some incentive to spend another finger to get that first aid kit, and like put unexpected consequences down the line.
Yeah. I think one last change I would make is to change the price of the pistol. There's a handgun in the vending machine, and it costs 5 fingers. I would say that I would make it cost, if a knife costs 2, I'd make it cost like 1, but don't give them ammo for it until you pay more, either teeth or a finger or bullet.
Or something else. Like I don't even want to say a foot, like I want to say a nose. And just like you need to put your face right up on this thing to get it lopped off.
All right, let's just unzip.
Oh.
Well, and that goes back to like, this is good for cult, because you can't stress the content warnings enough on this, and cult's kind of built for that. Like, kind of know that going in. And I mean, for this, it got pretty nasty. Just of like, I was bleeding heavily from the mouth. A ton of my teeth were gone, and we weren't even done yet. Like, we had still to take the rest of our fingers and go through that. Like, it was pretty grody, but it was a lot of fun to play with this level of just random people thrust into a horrible situation.
All right, so how would you expand the scenario then, or fit it into a longer campaign? Do you have any ideas?
Well, I am curious. This author, Choya, is a Korean author and has, I think, a couple of their works translated, but I did find their blog, and I want to see if they have some other stuff that would kind of fit in this same vein. I'm just really interested to kind of see what their viewpoint is of this. To Lex's choice, Poison Soup as well, I really want to look into more escape room type games. I think we've kind of talked about those. They provide a fairly easy game mastering sort of thing. Once you create the puzzles, it's pretty easy to run them because it's really just players figuring things out. So I'd like to see more of that. Maybe have more Saw-like games that include other investigators. You bring in more people. You have returning people. And I'd probably want to make sure that when people come in, they also have characters that maybe have like a dark history that could land them here, right? So that gives them some clues to say, like, maybe we'll follow up with the person who I kicked out of my company. And that could be a lead for the GM to use.
I definitely agree. I think, of course, I haven't heard of 10 before tonight, but I'm definitely going to check it out after this. I really would like to see more escape room type scenarios, because they can be short. Like in a time whenever scheduling is always the final boss of every tabletop RPG, if you only have one session to meet up, make it something fun and memorable. That like, these are really great to drop in, but I don't see a lot of them, much if at all. You know, also it's something that we've talked about sort of off the channel. I don't see a lot of puzzles in Call of Cthulhu. Like, that's, I think, one of the things I like most about Saturnine Chalice is it has some fun puzzles to help further along the clues. And I just don't see that implemented everywhere. It's more just like you find clues for this larger mystery, but not necessarily puzzles to suss out along the way. That definitely something to help, you know, try and feed into. If listeners have any recommendations for this, please let us know on Discord, because I'd love to find more of these.
And I think there is some bit of, you have to be careful as a GM, because you have to accept that sometimes the players may not be able to figure out a puzzle. So you might have to build in more of these idea roles and that sort of thing. But there's an excellent podcast called Escape This Podcast that does a lot of escape rooms, but purely through audio, right? There's not a lot of visual clues necessarily, but they not only produce them, but they create little, not quite packages. Like, you can go to the website and download all the clues and everything that they give. So you could re-theme some of their podcasts into horror scenarios if you wanted. And I think that could be a really fun way to get more escape rooms and puzzle solving into your games.
No, I like that.
So for this next part, we're going to be combining all three scenarios. I'm kidding.
It's lucid dreaming. It's first you have this fever dream of being a mobster fighting vampires, and then you get locked in prison and there's this bowl of soup, but then the soup is gone and it's just a vending machine and you need to get more soup, but you got to pay fingers to go get it.
Vito, what are you talking about, man? We got to wake up and kill
No,
the
I got to get the
vampires.
soup. I got to get the blood soup for the vampires.
Ah, my finger.
He bit my finger off.
Damn it, Charlie, get out of here.
Keep saying he's a vending machine.
Jesus Christ.
We hope our deranged utterings have been helpful in bringing these games to life at your table. You can join the autopsy discussions on Discord and subscribe or follow the podcast to hear more gruesome cases. Be sure to check out the show notes for links on where you can find these scenarios, where you can find us, and other links for things like handouts and actual plays of these scenarios that we recommend, and any other resources. So until next time, thanks for listening to RPG Reanimators.
Where your games can die
Or live.
On the table. We hope our deranged utterings have been helpful in bringing these lives to game at your table. Fuck me.
How many times can I hit this goddamn button? Okay, you want a
Hang on.
3?
No, I need to change this because I'm fucking reading it. It doesn't make sense. And bringing these. No, I'm just terrible.